Welcome back to Jack. I am reading a few pages out of the 4th chapter today with the title, The Funny Little Game. It begins with a quote that goes like this. Ignorance worships mystery. Reason explains it. By Robert G. Ingersoll. In the early hours of Sunday, 30th September 1888, the Ripper made 2 hits. The first was an aborted liaison at a place called Dutfield's Yard off Berner Street in Whitechapel, where he attacked and murdered a 44-year-old part-time whore, Elizabeth Stride. It seems his post-mortem activity was interrupted by the arrival of a young coster, Louis Diemschutz, with his pony and cart. Sensing something untoward, the animal shied in the darkness, and it was probably in the few moments of ensuing confusion that the assassin made himself scarce. Like an Argentine toad, touch the bastard and die. Our perjurer must have been almost toxic with homicidal adrenaline. For him, murder wasn't even half the story. What motivated him was ritual. He wanted body parts, trophies, wanted to leave his mark. A pleasure denied him at Dutfield's Yard by the arrival of Diemschutz and his nag. The hunt for more action took him west into the city, over the state line, so to speak, and therefore into a location that made some sense. Stride had been slaughtered on Charles Warren's patch in Whitechapel. Jack was now out of there, relatively safe in an entirely different police district, a part of London under the aegis of another ex-military man, Assistant Commissioner Major Sir Henry Smith. At about 1:30 a.m., the killer ran into his next victim, a 46-year-old drunk called Catherine Eddowes. The encounter tells us something about the Ripper's extraordinary credentials as a psychopath. Not an hour before, he'd cut so deep into a woman's throat that he was down to the vertebrae, yet here he clearly manifested no sign of physical or mental duress beyond that of a man taking a leisurely stroll. Okay, so now it goes on a little bit talking about the crime scene. I'm not going to read this again, but there's an illustration here if you like to see the picture. If you don't want to see the picture, close your eyes because I'm showing it now. Okay. This is crazy stuff. An uncoordinated frenzy of spite. However, the last cuts Brown describes are very different from the rest, and were almost certainly the last the Ripper made on this occasion. There was a cut on each side of the cheek, he notes. A cut which peeled up the skin, forming a triangular flap about 1.5 inches. Complementary of each other, these are the only duplicated injuries to the face. No slashing here. Rage has given way to balance and control. Irrespective of the darkness and the risk of discovery, it was a steady hand and deliberate thinking that cut this precise duel of marks. Like the items placed in order or arranged at Chapman's feet, and the piece of Eddowes' intestine placed between the body and the left arm, these cuts were made by design. No one would deny that Jack was into ritual. So what did these marks mean to him or to anybody else? Predicated on Dr. Brown's measurements, we can get an actual size idea of how they looked. I'm going to show you because this book has many illustrations. Ring any bells? Probably not if you're writing an article for the Ars Cator Coronatorum, but they look like a pair of compasses to me. Let us hear it again from Bro Warren, recalling the most indelible adventure of his Masonic life. Among the stones of Solomon's temple, he wrote, the next visitor will see the square and compasses as cut by our hand. A master mason in teaching apprentices, writes Masonic historian Bro Dr. J. Fort Newton, makes use of the compasses and the square. Over the next few pages, I want to explore the proposition to examine whether these curious symbols meant anything to Warren. But a problem immediately presents itself, and it's the same problem that faced Jack. The scene of Eddowes' murder on the square wasn't in Warren's manor. So if he's to enjoy the funny little games, some ingenuity must be employed. The question was, how could Eddowes be connected with Stride? The duo becoming the single and simultaneous presentation of a double event to the tortured and ridiculous boss cop. As with Annie Chapman, Jack cut Eddowes' pockets open. As with Chapman, he was looking for all things metal. His hunt for metal was part of the funny little games. No novice mason can decline this timeless ritual, and in Jack's Masonic nightmare, nor could any victim. Every piece of metal in Eddowes' possession was removed and strewn about her body. They included tin boxes, a tin matchbox, a small metal cigarette case, a knife, a metal teaspoon, a metal thimble laying off the finger, and several metal buttons found in the clotted blood after the body was removed. The rules of the psychotic game also demanded body parts, trophies. Eddowes' left kidney and uterus were extracted with rudimentary skill. These organs would have been of no use for any professional purpose, noted Dr. Brown, excusing himself of any support for Baxter's womb collector. When Jack had finished, he sliced off a piece of Eddowes' apron, about a half of it, according to testimony given at the inquest. These Victorian aprons were around 9 feet square. So we're looking at a sizable piece, something in order of 4 or 5 square feet of cloth. The consensus amongst ripperologists is that he used it to wipe blood and excrement from his knife and hands. But he could have done that just as well without cutting it off. I think he used it to wrap the kidney and uterus. The Telegraph described the purloined sheet of apron as wet with blood, suggesting more than a hand wipe. Although Eddowes had satisfied the signatory requirements of Jack's idea of fun, one thing was missing from the equation, and that was Warren. It was probably at his juncture that the metaphorical light went on. Rather than discarding the repugnant piece of cloth, wrapping body parts or not, the Ripper decided to convert the specific of city evidence into an intriguing metropolitan clue. It's my view that he carried this piece of apron out of one police jurisdiction and into another simply because he didn't want to entirely throw away the success of Eddowes on City Commissioner Smith. Well, isn't that nice of him? That's real teamwork right there. For about 15 minutes he walked east with his apron and his trophies, back into Warren's precinct of the Met. Why he didn't run into a tidal wave of coppers following the Stride murder isn't explained. Another of those mysteries. Were there no patrols out hunting him? Apparently not. The police didn't seem to be bothered with him any more than he seemed bothered by them. Well, that's convenient. Warren's claim that he had saturated Whitechapel with extra police requires explanation and will later be exposed for the fairy tale it was. By the supineness and fatuous stupidity of the police, jibed the Yorkshireman, one would have thought that for their own credit's sake the authorities would have organized such a system of espionage and control over the terror-ridden portion of the metropolis that an attempted repetition of such crimes would be instantly detected. Meanwhile, the lair idea has taken a bit of a bashing. Jack wasn't looking for anywhere to hide, and he still had some way to walk. Had any copper cared to stop him, he might well have wondered what this man's business was with a 9-inch blade and bits of pieces of a woman's body. But no one was going to question Gentleman Jack, and he knew it. And here's something of interest. Oops. After leaving the Eddowes crime scene, Jack vanished for the best part of 45 minutes. During this time, the kidney, and almost certainly the uterus as well, were transferred into a preservative. Subsequently determined for the kidney to be spirits of wine, meaning alcohol. Now that's interesting. Subsequently determined for the kidney to be spirits of wine, meaning alcohol. Trophies pickled, he was left with a piece of bloody apron. Virtually every other assassin on earth would now be scurrying anxiously to conceal this telltale piece of evidence, to destroy it in any way he could. But not Jack. At about 2:30 a.m., doubtless spruced up, he emerged from his inspired choice of digs. He was looking for an appropriate surface on which to write his funny little Masonic teaser for Warren, and he found it in the entrance of some tenements in Goldston Street, Whitechapel. The wall was black, and so was the passage. He could stand off the street without being seen. It was in this doorway that he left his bloody clue, and having a stick of chalk about him, wrote on the wall above it, "The Jews are the men that will not be blamed for nothing." About half an hour later, a 33-year-old constable called Alfred Long was proceeding down Goulston Street. His beat that evening had brought him past this doorway before, but he'd noticed nothing unusual. Now he stopped and shone his light at the writing on the wall. And since misspellings matter, I'm going to show you the writing on the wall. Oh, I don't think you can see it. So in case you couldn't see it, the word juice is spelled Juwes. Okay, enough of the funny little games. See you later.